Hi, this is fun. Olivia and I are going to do a joint Wednesdays in the Word together. And so we are in chapter 37 of Genesis. And we are reading, instead of our paper Bibles or our, bound Bibles, we're using the Bible app on our phones. Hey, yours shows up better than mine because you have a black background, but I have a white background. So Genesis chapter 37. Remember now, we're kind of done, well, not completely done, but we're shifting now focus from Jacob to his children. And so now this chapter is going to focus on Joseph. So I'm going to start reading in chapter 37 of Genesis, verse 1. Here we go. So Jacob settled again in the land of Canaan, where his father had lived as a foreigner. Canaan, remember, is the promised land. Isaac was living there, and Isaac stayed there for all of his life, pretty much in the same area. So this is kind of the land that Jacob, or Israel, has inherited. This is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. All right, we're going to stop there and talk a little bit. Joseph is 17 years old, and he is working as a shepherd, taking care of his father's flocks. But we're also told that he works for his half-brothers. Bilhah and Zilpah, remember, are the maidservants of, what do you do?
Those names.
I know, they're crazy names, aren't they? So you should probably name your firstborn Bilhah.
I just wonder
yeah.
how they come up with those names.
I know
in the
it.
Bible.
Well, I'm sure, names have meanings, but we're not told the women's names, meanings of their names. So anyway, so apparently those sons have been put in charge of the particular part of the flocks that Joseph is tending.
Wait, so the women are?
No, the sons, the women's sons, yeah. All right, so, but then when we look in verse 2, the end of verse 2, Joseph is a tattletale. Wow, is that a big surprise? The youngest brother here is the tattletale. Now remember that Joseph is the first son of Rachel, who was the favored wife. So, and that will kind of factor into the story here a little bit later. So,
to recap, Rachel is the one that he chose but wasn't initially married to.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. He got tricked.
Into marrying Leah.
Right.
Wait, so he was married to both Leah and Rachel and had children with both.
And with their maidservants. Yeah. Messed up. All right. Anyway. But it's how the 12 tribes of Israel come about.
Oh, from each.
These are the 12 sons. Yeah.
Mistress.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Mistress and wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So Joseph is a tattletale, and he goes and tattles to his dad some of the bad things that his brothers were doing. Probably not a wise move. But now then, let's move on and look at verse 3. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. All right, so, all parents say that they don't have favorites, and truly we don't. I mean, we love each of our children for a particular reason and stuff, but sometimes we have favorites, and Olivia's my favorite, right? Because you're my me. All right.
She tells me.
Yeah, I tell all my kids that. All right, so Joseph is Jacob's favorite because Jacob is older when Joseph is born, but also because Joseph is the child of Rachel. And Rachel was the one that he loved the most.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I never understood that just because, you love all of your children no matter who. But
Right.
I was like, I mean, obviously, if I'm the favorite, I know I'm going to tattletale. Because,
Well.
You can milk it. You don't
Yeah.
get in trouble.
Exactly.
But I just thought that he would love all of his sons the same. So I never understood
Well,
why.
and I think he loves all of them, but not the same. And you don't love all of your children the same. You love them each differently because they're all different. You love them with the same intensity, I think. But Joseph
Yeah.
is a favorite, and he's a favorite because he had fallen so deeply in love with Rachel. So,
Which that doesn't come across to me when I read about him and Rachel.
right.
I just thought he lusted after her for her beauty.
Oh no, he was truly in love with her.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
All right, so one day Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. All right, so this is where the whole Joseph and his coat of many colors comes from. And we're not
Yeah.
told, excuse me, that it's a coat of many colors. Some translations will say that it was a many-colored robe. In the translation that I'm reading, it says a beautiful robe. Regardless, Joseph is clearly Jacob's favorite, and his brothers don't like him for that. Not only for that, but because Joseph is a tattletale.
Yeah.
And
And he never gets in trouble, probably.
probably not.
I don't know what the significance of a robe is, but that's because I don't know much about like the clothing situation back then.
Yeah, the robe is like a long overcoat and everything, but apparently this one would have been more ornate and colorful than like just your everyday ordinary robe. And you wouldn't wear a fancy robe when you're doing ordinary everyday work. So this also kind of indicates that maybe Joseph is not working as hard maybe as the other brothers.
Because he's wearing it.
Right.
Also, is it hard to dye fabric
Yes.
at that point? Okay.
Yeah. All right, so verse 5. One night Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. Listen to this dream, he said. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly, my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine. His brothers responded, So, you think you will be our king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way that he talked about them. All right, so this conflict between Joseph and his brothers is really building, and this will figure into then the later part of the story here and what happens.
Well, I'm sure they responded that way because I'm sure Joseph wasn't like, listen to this dream I had.
Yeah, right.
He's probably like, I'm better than all of you.
Exactly, strutting around in his robe,
Type-
going
type
da da
shit.
da 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 da.
And
I'm
also,
better than you.
I would be mad because in the dream, if Joseph doesn't work that hard, kind of hearing that he's out in the field, which is very rare.
Right. Yeah.
Like, we work our butts off all day, and you just come in one day and you're king all over all
Yeah.
of us.
Yeah. All right. And to be fair, I mean, Joseph is, he's probably lording it over them on this dream and everything. But the other thing that we need to remember is dreams. Joseph doesn't have any control over his dreams. Dreams come from God.
Yeah.
These kinds of prophetic dreams that he has. And so let's kind of move to the rest of these dreams. So soon Joseph had another dream, and again he told his brothers about it. Listen, I have had another dream, he said. The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me.
What's
This
the
time-
significance of the 11 stars?
Yeah, we're going to get to that. This time he told the dream to his father as well as to his brothers, but his father scolded him. What kind of dream is that? He asked. Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you? So this time the dream is more than just the sheaves of corn, the corn shocks that are bowing. This time it's the sun and the moon, which is father and mother, and the 11 stars, which are his 11 brothers.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that's why then Jacob scolds him a little bit. And I think Jacob's scolding is not so much because Jacob clearly would understand the significance of dreams. Jacob had a couple of them. Remember, Jacob had the dream of the ladder
Yeah.
going into heaven. But I think Jacob kind of scolds him because he is a little uncertain and a little bit frightened about what this dream might be predicting. That I think Jacob senses and realizes that there's something big that's going to happen as a result of this dream. And of course, we know the end of the story. We know how this all shakes out. But they didn't.
He didn't.
No, they didn't.
And for it to involve, I didn't realize the sun and the moon meant father and mother.
Right.
No
Right.
idea.
Yeah.
Makes more sense now.
Yeah. Okay, verse 11. While his brothers were still jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dreams meant. So Jacob is thinking about this. All right, soon after this, Joseph's brothers went to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. Remember, Shechem is where they had the problems with Dinah. Yeah, Dinah,
Yep.
who was raped.
Yep.
So they're still kind of hanging out in that area. You know, they have a lot of herds and a lot of flocks, and that kind of country is kind of arid, and it's hard to find good pasture. So they do have to go lots of different places, but I don't know, if it were me, I'd stay far away from Shechem. All right, when they'd been gone for some time, Jacob said to Joseph, "Your brothers are pasturing the sheep at Shechem. Get ready, and I will send you to them." "I'm ready to go," Joseph replied. "Go and see how your brothers and the flocks are getting along," Jacob said. "Then come back and bring me a report." So Jacob sent him on his way, and Joseph traveled to Shechem from their home in the valley of Hebron. All right, so Jacob is clearly a little concerned about the boys because they're in the Shechem area, although, you know, they pretty much wiped out the whole village. But it's still a concern. He hasn't heard from them for a while, so he sends Joseph out to check up on them.
Would one of them normally come back?
More
Tell
than
them how
likely.
they're doing?
Yeah, more than likely. All right, so there's a concern here, and he sends him to check up on them. All right, verse 15. When he arrived there, a man from the area noticed him wandering around the countryside. "What are you looking for?" he asked. "I'm looking for my brothers," Joseph replied. "Do you know where they are pasturing their sheep?" "Yes," the man told him. "They have moved on from here, but I heard them say, 'Let's go on to Dothan.'" So Joseph followed his brothers to Dothan and found them there. All right, so he figures out where they're at. No big deal. He goes to check up on them, figuring he's going to go check on them, run back to his dad then with a report. They're okay. All right, here's where it gets dicey. Do you remember what happens here?
Yes.
What happens?
He gets sold into slavery.
Yeah.
I have this story memorized.
Do you? Good.
I mean, it was a
I'm so proud of her.
It was a beautiful movie.
All right. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As they approached, they made plans to kill him. Dun, dun, dun.
That's like a really far jump.
Yeah, it is. Here comes the dreamer, they said. "Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. We can tell our father that a wild animal has eaten him, and then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." All right, so here's kind of commentary on human condition. Their hatred of their brother has so consumed them, and their jealousy against him has so consumed them, that they are willing to talk about and entertain the notion of killing their own brother. So here's where I like to kind of stop a little bit in the story and say, what does this have to teach us as a lesson? And I think when we look at today's world, certainly this has a lesson for us, don't you think?
Yeah.
Think about the conflict that we see between people, especially in the political arena. We spend a lot of time finding reasons to hate one another, and to be angry with one another, and to point out differences between us and them. It's kind of like it's our habit almost to find ways to divide. It's no different than what's happening in this story here. And it gets to the point where we consider killing one another. And as we know, killing somebody doesn't mean you actually physically take their life, although that's what's going on here. But other ways that we kill one another with our words and our actions. I've seen a lot of commentary from a lot of my friends on Facebook talking about, the ways that we talk to each other about what political candidates we support, or any number of social issues. And some of the language that I hear people using against one another who are their brothers and sisters in Christ, it just appalls me sometimes. I'm overwhelmed by how mean and nasty we can get, and how easily and quickly we get there. And I think that's kind of where this story leads us, is to looking at inside of ourselves. How did I get here, essentially?
I think another part of it too is, and I'm the last person to speak about politics just because I don't look at them at all. I don't like to talk about them because I don't like the arguments it brings up. I just think it's a clear sign of disrespect that we learn, not only from our parents. People blame parents all the time for disrespectful kids.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has a lot to do with just pretty much adults in kids' life showing them, hey, it's okay to treat someone with disrespect, because we shouldn't be talking to one another on social media about, like, if you were to like Trump and I like Biden, then that's fine, but we shouldn't talk to each other disrespectfully, because
Right.
everyone can form their own opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm not you, so I'm not going to understand why you like
Well, or even
them.
like the fact that you like Brussels sprouts and I don't,
No, it's true. She doesn't. I love them, and to this day I don't understand why she doesn't like them. But that's just the key. But I don't tell my mom. I'm not disrespectful to her, and I'm definitely like not mean about it.
Right.
I mean, you're my mom, so. But regardless, she's still a human being. Like, if it was anybody else who says they don't like food or they complain, I hate complainers. I'm a very positive person, but I think it takes a lot of energy to just complain all the time.
Yeah.
We need to be more grateful, but it's also, don't complain about someone else's point of view or why they don't like a certain food.
Right.
You're not them.
Right.
You're not in their minds.
Yeah.
But we need to.
And really, what harm does it do to you personally,
It's like being upset at something. Like, for me, I've heard a lot lately when I was upset, and this is my first time living with someone who's not family. My little sister, her youngest, is quick to remind me. She's like, well, does it physically hurt you, or are you just annoyed? And she's right. It doesn't do anything to me physically.
Yeah.
People get so wrapped up and it's all about me, and I'm like, it's not though.
Yeah.
Everyone is their own person, but we don't need to be disrespectful.
Yeah.
And we just need to not let it go. I mean, it can be annoying, but there's nothing you can do.
Right.
Like, there's no sense in trying to change a
Well,
person.
and ultimately, I think the important thing for us to remember is that even though we have differing opinions about different things, we're still all brothers and sisters in Christ.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing.
And this story, I think Joseph is just being disrespectful. And at some point, I would get so mad at him that, not that I would kill anyone, because
Right.
that's just not my nature, but I can see how they would want to kill him at that time.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah,
a
there's
tattletale.
definite-
He
there's-
doesn't work. Like,
There's definite conflict going on between the brothers. And it's deep seated. It probably comes from the conflict that's happened between the mothers, especially between Rachel and Leah. Because
I'm
Leah,
sure because they're fighting for his attention, for
Right.
Jacob's attention.
right.
But I think.
Well, and Leah's, we're told she's not loved.
Which she probably feels that, when you're not
Yeah.
loved by someone and you're just.
Right.
She's basically a vessel for having children.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm sure Jacob scolds Joseph, but he hasn't. In this case, I would blame Rachel and Jacob because they haven't taught Joseph you need to be respectful to people.
Yeah.
Especially your brothers.
Especially your older brothers. Yeah. All right, well, let's move on. So they're plotting to kill their brother, but verse 21, when Reuben heard of their scheme, he came to Joseph's rescue. Reuben is the oldest. He is Leah's firstborn. So he comes to Joseph's rescue and says, let's not kill him. Why should we shed any blood? Let's just throw him into this empty cistern here in the wilderness. Then he'll die without our laying a hand on him. Reuben was secretly planning to rescue Joseph and return him to his father. So Reuben is looking out for his younger brother. Joseph is the second to the youngest.
That I don't understand why Reuben likes him so much.
Well, because he's his brother. He loves him, and he realizes probably that it will cause his father a great amount of pain. Reuben is also not only looking out for Joseph, but he's looking out for Jacob. He doesn't want to cause his father that kind of pain and grief.
I wonder how old Reuben is at this point, because you would only chalk that up to being older and having more maturity.
I would bet he's considerably older. He is probably a good 10 to 15 years older than Joseph at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, so then,
Yeah. All right, so when Joseph arrived, his brothers ripped off the beautiful robe he was wearing. Then they grabbed him and threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty. There was no water in it. Good thing. Then, just as they were sitting down to eat, they looked up and saw a caravan of camels in the distance coming toward them. It was a group of Ishmaelite traders taking a load of gum, balm, and aromatic resin from Gilead down to Egypt.
So a cistern is a well.
It's not really a well. It is kind of like a big pit, usually lined with stone, and it will store like rainwater and run off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they're gonna throw him in there, or they did.
Yeah.
So then Judah, who is the second oldest, I believe, says to his brothers, what will we gain by killing our brother? We'd have to cover up the crime. Instead of hurting him, let's sell him to those Ishmaelite traders. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. And his brothers agreed. Just a note here, the Ishmaelite traders, that name will be familiar. Ishmael, remember who Ishmael is? Ishmael is Isaac's brother, half-brother. Ishmael is the child that Abraham has with Hagar. Yeah. So these are descendants of Ishmael then. So these would be...
Which is why they're called Ishmaelites.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Isaac is these boys' grandfather.
Oh.
So this is their great uncle's descendants, children.
Okay.
So kind of like, what, I don't know, second cousins, something like that.
Also, Judah is smart for he doesn't want to do all the. He wants to limit the amount of work he has.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to kill someone apparently.
And then cover it up.
And then cover it
Yeah.
up. So he's like, why do this? So I think
Right.
that's shows just how sneaky and conniving
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
is.
And we can guess that Reuben is probably not around here during this conversation, because remember, Reuben is like, let's dump him in the cistern and leave him to die. And Reuben's plan was to come back and
rescue him. Yeah.
Okay? So Reuben's not around for this conversation.
Which I wonder if the brothers knew that.
No.
secretly knew that Reuben liked him and didn't hate him.
I don't
Because you
think so.
you kind of know, like with me and my siblings, we kind of know when we're mad at each other and who's not anymore. So if you want to have like a complaining session, I'll call them. You don't like include the person that you want to complain about.
Right.
So I'm sure they waited until Reuben probably stepped away or something just to be like, okay, let's switch up the plan. Because they wouldn't know his exact plan, but they would know he's up to something.
Probably. Yeah. Good thought. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
All right. So when the Ishmaelites, I'm in verse 28. So when the Ishmaelites, who were Midianite traders, Midianite is the same word for Ishmaelite. It's the same tribe. They just they call them Midianites because the Ishmaelites lived in the land of Midian.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. So when they came by, Joseph's brothers pulled him out of the cistern and sold him to them for 20 pieces of silver, and the traders took him to Egypt.
It's a lot of silver.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. It was a good amount of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometime later, Reuben returned to get Joseph out of the cistern. When he saw that discovered that Joseph was missing, he tore his clothes in grief. One of the signs of it's kind of a ritual that Jewish people do is when somebody dies, they call it rending their garments. They tear them, and that signifies that they're in mourning. It's kind of like their heart is being ripped open or being ripped into.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he tears his clothes in grief, and then he goes back to his brothers, and he says, the boy is gone. What will I do now? So he's clearly distraught. He's like, dang, what are we going to do? This has gone way out of hand, guys.
Kind of when she reads the next verse, it kind of solidifies what I was saying about how they knew he was planning something. Because if you look at their reaction, it's not like, oh no.
Yeah, exactly.
There's not even pretending of like, or even being in shock that he went back to get Joseph. Like there's no.
Yeah. So then, verse 31. The brothers killed a young goat and dipped Joseph's robe in its blood. They sent the beautiful robe to their father with this message: look at what we found. Doesn't this robe belong to your son? Can
I just say how like evil that is?
It's
truly
crazy.
And I say evil because that's really, I can't imagine like pretending to kill like Natalie and sending you her shirt being like.
And the thing is that you don't even have the balls to show up.
Yeah, you
to
just
me in
send
person.
it in the mail.
Just send, like UPS. I'm gonna UPS this to her.
But like, can you imagine having that much evil to even do that to your parent? Just to anyone, like to anyone in the family. That's kind of what serial killers do. Is sometimes they'll send pieces of their victim to their family members.
Right.
So this is.
Yeah. So this is horrible.
Yeah.
What these guys have done. And it kind of goes back to what Olivia was saying earlier then, this lack of respect. You know, when we were having this conversation about how disrespectful we get to one another. This has taken disrespect to a whole new low.
Yeah.
That they are treating their father so poorly. And I also find it interesting that the message that they send says, doesn't this robe belong to your son? They don't even call him their brother.
They've disowned him.
Your son.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah.
I don't think they even considered Jacob really their father because of the amount of disrespect they have for them at that point. Because when you're 18 and young, like, probably at some point in my foolish years, I don't think I even called you my mom at some point. I just I would call her Jan. Which now it's like, you're so dumb. When you look back and you're like, wow, I was a dumb 18-year-old. But to me, this is just them not even considering that Jacob is their father at this point. Because, like, they don't even care about his feelings.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So, verse 33, their father recognized it immediately. Yes, he said, it is my son's robe. A wild animal must have eaten him. Joseph has clearly been torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes and dressed himself in burlap. He mourned deeply for his son for a long time. His family all tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. I will go to my grave mourning for my son, he would say, and then he would weep. Meanwhile, the Midianite traders arrived in Egypt, where they sold Joseph to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Potiphar was captain of the palace guard. All right.
If you're Jacob, wouldn't you want to be comforted by your family?
Yeah.
I can see why his 11 sons wouldn't want to be considered his children.
Although,
because that's taking favorite to a whole new level.
Yeah.
You know.
Although it kind of appears, though, that maybe they've come back. Because we're told that Jacob mourns for a long time. So clearly they've returned. I think that the 11 sons are now feeling a great amount of remorse for what they've done. But you can't unring the bell. I mean, they have not only committed the crime of plotting to kill their brother or leave him for dead, they've sold him into slavery, and they've lied about it.
Yeah. This doesn't include Reuben, by the way, because Reuben was...
Well, Reuben has clearly bought into... He's gone along with the lie, though.
I don't know if he's doing that to protect his father, though.
Maybe.
At this point, because he sees, like, I don't know what good it would do to tell his dad, oh, they actually sold him into slavery. Or maybe he just really thinks he's dead because he doesn't know what happened to him.
Well, he clearly knows that they sold him into slavery because he comes back and realizes that he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll bet you they told him. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's something the Bible doesn't really talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have to kind of read between the lines here. I think the big thing that we look at is this is how sin starts off. Sometimes it starts with what is seemingly a small thing. It's the hatred and the competition between brothers. And it mushroomed into something much bigger. It mushroomed into a plot to kill. That plot was kind of backtracked a little bit and then went into selling their own brother into slavery, which is incredible to me. But to me, I think the most harmful sin is to lie to Jacob and tell him that his son is dead. It's because if they had just fessed up and said, oh, we sold him, then there's hope. You know, you can go after them and get him back, buy him back or something. I don't know.
But the 10 of them didn't want him back because they wanted to be treated with the same love that he had for Joseph.
Yeah. Well, and they probably realized that then they get a bigger share of the inheritance.
Yeah.
With Joseph out of the way.
Which may be a motivation for Reuben to go along with the lie, even though he loved Joseph.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's always a motivation.
There is.
I don't think he would willingly. I think he was bribed with some offer or something.
Maybe.
You know?
The ending of this, where we're told that Joseph, though, is sold to Potiphar, who is a high official in Pharaoh's court. This kind of gives us a little bit of a inkling of hope, as we'll find out in the coming chapters. God is looking out for Joseph here. There is a protective nature at work, and we're going to see that play out in later chapters. And if you know the story of Joseph, you know how this plays out. But we'll continue to kind of dig into this. But remember, God works through all these bad situations. He can work good out. And also remember the dreams that Joseph has. The dreams that Joseph has are significant. And they will figure later in the story as well.
Yeah, which we all know. But people, it isn't luck that he ended up being purchased by Potiphar.
Absolutely not. It's not luck.
Because people forget that normally, if you're sold as a slave, you wouldn't even hit the palace or whatever you want to call it. The people in the palace. There's no way. That wasn't sheer dumb luck.
Right. That's God's hand is all over this here.
I wonder if he knew that. Joseph knew that.
I don't know. Can you imagine how scared he must have been? He's 17.
Yeah. But if you come to the palace and you're like, I'm the captain of the guard's slave, I wonder if that would start the inclination of like,
God's watching out for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure he knew about God at that point.
Oh, absolutely.
They don't really talk about it a lot.
Well, they don't, but we
chapter,
saw Jacob's faith really increase, throughout his life and everything. So, and remember, before Jacob goes back to the promised land, he kind of recenters his household around the one true God. He orders them to get rid of all the other idols and things like that. So we can presume that this is a household that is centered around the worship of Yahweh. So that's the assumption I think that we have to continue to move forward with. And more than likely these boys are brought up in that kind of tradition as well.
And it confirms to me that when you're young, you're dumb. Because, look at Joseph, even though he knows that God is all powerful, he's still arrogant, and he's kind of like, I'm the favorite, milking it for all he can.
Yeah.
Which, no fault to him, that's just him being 17 years old and being dumb. People are always quick to...
We all do it.
No, and people overlook that.
Right.
A lot, especially with this story, because they don't actually read that part.
Yeah.
Because we all have it memorized. We all know what happens, but you don't actually...
Well, those of us who have grown up in the faith have that all memorized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which we're quick to skip that part, though, when we tell people.
Yeah.
About this story. Because I don't know why we want to ignore that when we are young, we are dumb.
Right.
And we're arrogant. And that's fine. That's not a bad thing. People make it out to be a terrible thing.
It's part of the growing process, I think, and that's part of Joseph's story. It's part of his growing process.
But even in today, when people your age, not that you're old, but I'm sure you get frustrated with probably teenagers, and I think they don't take the time to realize that's just, it's not an excuse. You should always be respectful to people.
Yeah.
But you are going to be a little arrogant, and you are going to be...
It's expected. We've all been there, done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But people try to overcorrect in it, and it just doesn't work.
Right.
And the way society does it today.
Right.
It's just not helpful. It would be more useful. Just teach respect. I think respect is not taught.
Respect and care for one another. I think those are the two big lessons out of this. Two of the big lessons. I think the other big lesson for us out of this passage is to look at how quickly sin can multiply, the different layers.
Yeah, because it started off, and I think Jacob's at fault. Also, I think Leah, they don't talk about Leah enough, and I think her resentment towards Rachel for sure put resentment in her sons.
Yeah, probably.
Rather than treating them all with respect. It sucks. You're not loved, but you can't really do anything in the situation, and people are so quick to make a negative rather than making a positive out of something.
Right.
And that's just how
Because clearly they were all well taken care of.
Oh, yeah, because he had probably a large flock, which is not cheap, so you're probably seen as well off in that time. Yeah. He was able to get a robe with colors.
Right.
He was well off at that time. Sorry, cat appearance. But,
all right. Well, thanks for joining us. This was fun. It was fun to do this kind of conversation. I hope you learned a lot. And,
don't hate on me.
Thanks for joining me. That was fun to do with you.
Yeah, this was fun.
All right.
I like this.
Okay. Have a great week. And I'll see you next week.